This is a piece of tin foil. This is an ordinary biro pen, and I'm now going to take the impression by rubbing, first of all, over the desired piece to be cut out with the back of the pen. Now I've got an image and I can see where I'm working, and so I take the pen and I emboss into the grooves of the design. So now I have to take the razor blade and I cut it out by hand. And lo, there we have the helmet. These are the pieces that make up St. George and the Dragon, and as you can see there's quite a lot of pieces. Here is his helmet, which I've just cut out, and here is another piece of his visor that goes to the helmet. Here is the sword, for the handle of the sword that he's holding. This is the dragon's head, or part of the dragon's head, which is embossed. Here is the edging to his shield. I found in an old manuscript, a true knight am I, anger me and try, and that is embossed around the edge of the shield. I was at the art college in Great Yarmouth, and during the school holidays we students used to take a little part-time job. I said, what have you got me? Oh, he said, the Theatre Royal Norwich wants ushers to show people to their seats. So I said, well, that suits fine. So they sent me along on a cold December morning. There I was, standing outside the box office of the Theatre Royal Norwich, waiting for it to open, because they didn't open until 10 o'clock. I was waiting there, and round the corner there came a lady wearing a fur coat and a lot of makeup. And she saw me standing there, and she came up to me and she said, "Excuse me, are you one of my boys?" I said, "Well, no, I'm waiting for the box office to open for a job as an usher." "They will pay you now. My husband is producing this pantomime," she said, "and we can give you a job working for us." So without more ado, I followed her, and we went into a little hall nearby where the rehearsals were taking place, and all the ballet girls were limbering up on their points, and the piano was tinkling, and actors were sitting around on stools and chairs. "Joe," she said, "the first thing I want you to do is to go round to the stage door," she said, "and go upstairs, and you'll see a lot of hampers full of clothes. And I want you to hang those clothes for me on all the hangers you find. Get them hung for me." So I thought, well, that's a start. So off I went, and I went to the stage door, and yes, I found all the hampers, found all the stage costumes, and her husband, Mr. Jerry Jerome, was there. "Now look, Cocker," he said, "one of the boys hasn't turned up for for the pantomime. Would you like to step in?" So there it was. I set rehearsing with the cast, and I was in the chorus. And when the curtain went up on the Boxing Day, there I was dressed as a Chinese mandarin in full view of the audience and doing a few dance steps. The show people were the nicest people I ever worked for. You know, they really understood me. The very first influence I ever had with the toy theatre was when I was 10 years old. I'd been taken to the pantomime by my parents in Norwich at the Theatre Royal to see the pantomime of Dick Whittington. I thought if only I could do something to recreate it. So in the cupboard there was an empty cracker box. We'd had a box of crackers for Christmas. And so I'd also received in my Christmas stocking a box of wax crayons and some paints, a box of watercolour paints. So I set to drawing a proscenium on the back of the cracker box. I was particularly taken by the scene on Highgate Hill, where there was a wonderful pink sky. For that scene, I remember crayoning in with my crayons the pink sky, the sunset sky. And I made the little hill on the hillock for Highgate Hill and cut it out, and I put the little figure of Dick Whittington sitting on the top with his cat, all cut out of paper. And the very next incident that occurred to me was on my 14th birthday, when I was actually given a Benjamin Pollock toy theatre. Now this is a scene from a very famous Victorian play by Mr. J.K. Green called The Silver Palace. And these are the characters. There's Coral Crown and there's Lady Luminia. It's a little play supposedly set at the bottom of the sea. It's a great battle between the Fire Kings and the Water Kings. Aladdin, I think, was one of my favourites. I remember giving about 12 performances of it one Christmas. And of course that really had me hooked from then on the toy theatre, yeah. After that, I was browsing in a bookshop, second-hand bookshop, and I found Mr. George Speight's book on the toy theatre that he'd written, History of the Toy Theatre. And in the book, Mr. Speight describes the processes of making a copper plate to print the designs from. And then when I was about 21, I decided to try my hand at making a copper plate as it was described in the book. So I went out to the local art shop, Mr. Dyer in Great Yarmouth, and I ordered a copper plate from him and some printing ink and printing paper and etching ground and everything that I needed. I'd already made a drawing of Mr. Cook as the waterman, a sailor subject, dressed as a sailor. And I put the wax ground all over the plate. And then I transferred the drawing to it in reverse, then drew it through with a needle, an etching needle, through the wax. And then I put the plate into the acid and left it there for about 25 minutes. And out came my plate etched. These are characters I designed for the Phantom of the Opera, a Victorian version of the original book. Andrew Lloyd Webber wrote to me requesting a series of plates for me to print them especially for them and colour them, which I did. This is the sheet of characters, the first sheet of characters I designed for the play. This is the salon scene, and the colours are all mixed and applied to the sheet by hand. There's only 3 used actually: the carmine, the Prussian blue and the Gamboge yellow. This is the scene in the sewers underneath the opera house, where a lot of the action takes place. And I designed it with the little boat in the foreground and with the waters running.
Phantom, if you have a heart, do not hold me prisoner here.
Prisoner? But Christine, you inspire me. I am composing great arias for you to sing.
I faint and tremble. Monster, set me free.
If you spurn my adulation, I have nothing left but death.
Death?
Yes, death for us both. The perfect finale.
6 years ago, I had a phone call from a gentleman in America, and he said, we're having a ball. Could we use some of your designs for the Phantom of the Opera on our invitation cards? So I said, well, yes, of course, but one thing puzzles me. How do you know about my designs for the Phantom of the Opera? So he said, well, they're in the book on the Phantom of the Opera. So I thought, well, I didn't know anything about this. Lo and behold, reproduced in the pages were 5 of my designs. During the holidays, I said we used to take work in local shops or restaurants and things, which we did. And on one occasion I was working for Mr. Hawkins, who was an antique dealer in Great Yarmouth. One day he had brought in some pieces of antiquity, and amongst them was this little Victorian dish. And I said to Mr. Hawkins, do we put it in the window? He said, oh yes, mark it at 7 and 6pence. So I put it in the window and thought no more about it. Lo and behold, who should come round the corner but Ronald Ricks into the shop. And he said to me, could I see the little bit of glass in the window? So I took it out and showed him. And he said, yes, I like that. And so I said, can I show you our Victorian room, sir? So he said, oh, yes, I'd like to see it. So I showed him the Victorian room, and he bought a couple of pieces, bits of Staffordshire. And so he then said to me, he said, when is your half day off? So I said, on Thursdays. I get a half day off. So he said, well, would you like to come for a little drive out along the coast, and I'll show you the scenery. So I said, well, that's very kind. So That's what we did on a Thursday. I put on my very best Italian suit that I had, because we used to dress in those days, as you know, if we were going anywhere. He had one of those fabulous 1950s cars, huge thing, as you know, and it was a brilliant blue, and he was wearing a brilliant orange shirt. And orange and blue do go together very well, as you know, in the colour chart. We enjoyed life together very much indeed. Ronald was my whole life, really. Ronald used to pose for some of my designs for me. I used to take a camera with me, and I used to get him into the old actors' attitudes, and he very kindly let me take a picture of him standing in the attitudes that these very old Victorian actors used to stand in. I used to say, now Ronald, put that leg a bit more forward and lean back a bit more and get into the tuppence coloured attitude, you know. So he used to oblige me, and I put him through the most awful contortions. Well, now, this is my old work table, which I've worked every tinsel print on I've ever made since 1960. It was given to me by Ronald. Yes, it's a highwayman print that I made, riding on his horse at midnight. When you're on your own, it's very much a loner's game, you know, because there's just you, your paper or your canvas with the paint brushes and so forth, and you just have to make the most of it.